Broadcasting from the KC Coyote Studios, you're listening to Kearney Live on 102.7 KPGZ. Kearney Live is presented by Kearney Trust Company. Kearney Trust, 310 West 92 Highway in Kearney. The phone number is 816-628-6666. And now here's the host of Kearney Live, Mike Davis and Jim Dickerson.
And welcome to Kearney Live. I am your host, Mike Davis, along with Jim Dickerson and producer, engineer, trash can emptier.
All-around good guy.
All-around good guy. This guy does just about everything that needs to be done around a radio station. Mr. Brian Watts.
Thank you.
So glad you were. I love having when you've got your mic open.
I just thought of it about 3 seconds before we hopped on air.
Nicely done, sir.
Thank you.
And I will say that our guest today makes it 3-1 for folks who have worked in law enforcement versus those who have not. So
I guess the big question would be,
who's our guest?
I was gonna say, who do you think the one is?
Well, I'll go ahead and admit it.
Oh, yeah, you just ruined it. We could have given away stuff.
Well, that's possible
if they guessed properly.
Now, I've had some dealings with law enforcement.
Well, that doesn't quite count.
But I've never spent a night in jail. I probably should have a time or two. But,
well,
yeah, you get away with things every once in a while. We have Captain Will Akin in the studio with us today. Will, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me here.
Well, I met you, I think, a couple of months ago or so at the chamber meeting that we had, our chamber luncheon.
Yes.
And you and I got to talking, and I said, you know what? You're an interesting man. We need to have you on the air.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well,
look forward to it.
No, I think thanks, Brian.
You're not going to say that in about 10 minutes, but we'll let that go.
Brian did all the work getting you here, but we're glad to have you here. Plus, thank you for all the work you do for the community and putting yourself out there as a first responder and, helping people.
Definitely my pleasure.
Yeah, it means a lot to us. I know we here at the radio station are big fans of first responders and the military, and it's always, always good to have you folks on the air with us. You mentioned to me while we were off the air that I really wasn't sure what we were going to talk about. So you said,
don't feel bad because that's pretty standard for Mike. We have to tell him, just
my show prep is sitting in this chair and making sure my microphone works. But no, in all seriousness, we're going to talk about emergency preparedness, which covers just a pretty broad range of meaning. And I think one of the things that you and I talked about when we first met was the notion that when you're hearing those sirens during inclement weather, during a tornado warning, or for whatever reason, or even during the test on Wednesdays, which is today one of those days that they may run the...
Not today.
Test. Well, in any case, folks say, gosh, I couldn't hear the siren. Tell me about that. Why wouldn't they be able to, and should they be able to?
So tornado sirens, usually, they're referred to as tornado sirens, but they're considered outdoor warning sirens. Mm-hmm. And so they're meant for people outside. And so if you're inside your house and, the outdoor warning sirens going off and they have their TV on or they're doing some kind of chores or something like that, or the wind is blowing the wrong way, they're not going to be able to hear the outdoor warning siren. So one of the things that we try to get across is they're meant for people outside. Mm-hmm. If you live by a siren, great, because that's just one more method of hearing an alert for an emergency, typically for weather. And, we have our phones. You have to opt out of the emergency alert system on your phone. So if you fall within the polygon of the National Weather Service is establishing this is the area that there's going to be a tornado, your phone's going to go off. Mm-hmm. And even if your phone doesn't go off, you're going to probably hear it on the radio. You're going to hear it on TV if you're watching TV. Right. So you have, and everyone should have a weather radio at home.
That's a good idea.
Little plug there.
Yeah.
And hypothetically, if I needed a weather radio, where might I get one?
You can buy them typically at Price Chopper, Hy-Vee, Home Depot, Lowe's. I think just about every department store.
You know what I was going to say? Radio Shack, and they don't even exist
anymore.
They
don't exist anymore, but I think they did carry them at one time.
Right.
Best Buy.
Right.
Best Buy has them.
There you go. Yeah.
But yeah, we have multiple methods of receiving this alert, and sirens is just one of them.
Right. So what else? How would people know? And you pointed out, obviously, we live in a digital age, so people are oftentimes streaming their television now.
Yeah.
is there any way, if you're streaming television, you're watching a movie on Netflix or whatever, is there a way that you'll know that there's inclement weather or a warning out there?
One of the things I want to point out is inclement weather is not something that pops up and surprises us. The National Weather Service, every network's meteorologist, I mean, they're on the ball and they're working with multiple agencies to let people know that a system is coming.
Right.
So,
and look out the window.
Well, it's funny because we have storm spotters, right?
Yes.
We put on a storm spotter training every year. And then we have storm chasers. Awesome job. I'd never want to do that. But then we have storm watchers.
Right.
That's everyone else.
Right. Yeah, I like that.
Everybody who hears the siren and
then
races
run
out
outside.
immediately outside,
Yeah.
stands in the driveway.
And
Oh
looks
my
up.
gosh.
Yeah.
With their phones, right?
Oh,
They want to
yeah.
take pictures
You
and
gotta
be the next big story.
Yep, you got to be that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So true. I think when you say emergency preparedness, there are other things above and beyond being able to hear a siren. Well, let's talk about some of those things.
The number one thing is a weather radio because it can run off electricity and battery. So if your power goes out, it still has a battery backup.
Right.
And as long as it's properly programmed, you're going to get the information, the alert from the National Weather Service right when it comes out. With phones, with TV, they get their notifications from the original alert. So, if you follow the pathway, it may take a minute. I'm over exaggerating a minute. It's going to take longer than a weather radio.
Right.
So that's number one. But you also have cell phones. And so if you're streaming your television and stuff like that, I'm not sure how that works, but at least on your phones, as long as you don't opt out of the EAS, then you're going to get that notification.
Yeah, it's a priority setting. It'll overshadow like Netflix or something like that.
Yeah.
Or whatever you're
so
doing.
if you're on your phone, now I don't know how that works with Netflix or Hulu if you're watching it on your television.
I seem to
That's a good
remember.
question.
Well, I seem to remember seeing a message that perhaps came through during streaming, and I'm one of those people that cut the cable, keep the internet, but cut the cable and stream through different services. I can almost guarantee you that I saw some kind of a warning within the last couple of years that came through.
I'm positive that it comes up because there's it's critical to get that information out to everyone so that they are prepared.
Yeah.
Here in Clay County, we have a history of tornadoes running through the county.
Yikes.
And it's not something that should pop up as a surprise for us anymore.
No doubt about that. True.
If you look at the last several years, I think the last one was 2003, 2005, early 2000s. And then we had one that hit Smithville a few years ago or 2 years ago. And then we had this one just 3 weeks ago.
Right.
So, in conjunction with everything that's available, we shouldn't be surprised. There's nothing that we can do to stop that kind of weather. So the best thing that we can do is just be prepared for it. And one of those steps of preparation is to have a means of getting that information either digitally, over the radio, or on television, if people are still watching television.
Right. I think it really is a matter of when we say emergency preparedness, the key word there is preparedness, which really means go get yourself a weather radio. They're relatively cheap, I would imagine. $25.
Yeah, they run around $25, $30, depending on if there's a sale or how many they purchased.
And keep in sorry, Jim.
No,
and keep in mind that these things can happen rather quickly. Weather can potentially happen quickly, but best to be prepared. Take care of these things when the sun's out, and prepare yourself mentally for these things, and have the proper equipment. Have the wherewithal to know that, okay, if this happens, I have all of these things, and indeed I'm prepared. What are some of the other things that people would need besides a weather radio? And do they need a place in their basement that is specific to shelter from storms?
Basements are perfect. There are some living conditions or circumstances where you don't have a basement. There are other places in the house that you can go to, the center of the house being the primary location, away from windows, because you don't want the wind or debris to break the windows and you sustain secondary injuries.
Right.
But basements are definitely the place to go. Having a plan. We have plans, multiple plans for fires. We have plans for other kind of disasters we've experienced floods. I mean, we're experiencing floods, so having a plan. But then also when we talk about preparedness, it's not just receiving the information, but being prepared with the necessary equipment or tools or whatever you need. So if you do have to go down to your basement, you're not left in the dark, so to say. So having flashlights and extra batteries,
There you
a
go.
weather radio, clothing. People forget about shoes. You know, what happens if you have to leave?
And walk through the rubble. Yeah.
Yes, because
Well, and that's the thing. I mean,
Yeah.
if your house gets hit by a tornado
Yeah.
and you're in the basement, there's going to be debris, and you're going to have to walk through it. And if you went down in your basement barefoot because you're used to it, that's not going to end well. So
no. And, you know, it's much more than just stepping on rubble. You have to think about things beyond that. What happens if you step on a rusty nail and it goes through your foot? Now you have to worry
nails,
about
glass,
Yeah.
and even when I say rubble, I mean wood's going to break, it's going to splinter, and that stuff is going to go everywhere.
You know, when you guys are talking about this stuff, it reminds me of some of the videos you see post-disaster a couple of days later. I mean, I think of storms that we saw in Oklahoma a few years back. Well, right here in Joplin,
absolutely
close to us
Yeah.
here in Joplin, and you see the video footage of the carnage after a storm like that. Flip flops ain't going to cut it, and you really do have to be prepared and think. And I would say, prepare yourself for the worst and hope for the best.
If it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But, you know, you brought up a real good point. So I think back, even thinking back to 2004, but even before that, and having lived in this area my whole life, there were times in the 80s when if a tornado came, you knew about it about a minute and a half before it got there. This deal, I guess, what's it been, 2 or 3 weeks now, the Kearney one, we technically kind of knew this might be a problem 24 hours ahead of time.
Easily.
Now, there's an argument for, you know, the weather people overplaying it and, you know, but that said, in that case anyway, we knew 24 hours ahead of time. And, you know, the other thing is, if you look at the coverage, the helicopter guys, they were up and going. They knew way ahead of time. So it's not like this was a big surprise. Right. Then on top of that, because of the way social media works, the emergency management that you guys do, it started way out in Kansas. We knew here in Kearney well ahead of time. Yeah. And that honestly is that's probably the first time I've actually had to go to the basement where I was like,
this could happen. Right.
It's kind of, you know, and we actually did go to the basement. That's the first time we've had to do that. But the reason is because the technology you guys provide is so good anymore. You know exactly where, I mean, within reason, you know where and when it's going to hit. It's not like it used to be where you were kind of like, I have no idea.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the National Weather Service provides these amazing maps where my wife and I were out of town. And we were in Colorado, and we were watching the storm materialize over the course of an hour or so. And we knew from social media and so forth that there was a storm about ready to go through, very, very close to our homes and through communities that, you know, that have right here in Kearney and so forth. But we were able to follow this storm literally on a mobile phone and watch the, you know, this big red, orange, yellow colored mass just work its way, well, you know, right over the places that we know and where the people, you know, that we love live. And it's fascinating to know that we have that sort of access.
And, you know, the National Weather Service does a phenomenal job in our area. Definitely a shout out for Pleasant Hill, you know, National Weather Service.
Right.
But it's a collaborative effort because when they send the information out, all the emergency managers in all of our counties, we work together and we're communicating. We have a statewide system that we communicate on called WebEOC. So we're notifying everyone, but we're also making phone calls at the same time because in our area, we know that predominantly the weather's going to be coming from the west. And so our partners in Johnson County, Kansas, and Wyandotte and Leavenworth, we're paying attention to what's going on over there. So we know how to prepare over here.
Right.
And, you know, just that collaborative effort and retweeting and reposting on social media and just getting that word out. Huge advantage compared to the 80s and even before that. I mean, really, if you think about it, in the last 10 years, you know, when social media really got big, I mean, what were we doing before? We were relying on TV and outdoor warning sirens.
Right.
But
now,
and
the other thing, because of the way the phones work and everything else, when you go to your basement, everybody still has connection. they can see what's coming and what's going on. But I think one of the things that really goes, it's a tribute to you guys and the work you've done that a lot of people don't talk about because since it didn't happen, it's not that big of a deal. The number of deaths and injuries is so minimal now.
Right.
It's almost, you'll hear, 3 people were hurt. And a lot of times the 3 people that were hurt, it's a minimal injury.
Yeah.
They got hit by flying debris or something like that. Whereas, excuse me, years ago, the number of injuries was
it was
over
staggering.
and beyond that.
Yeah, it really was. We're visiting today with Captain Will Akin, and you are with the Clay County Sheriff's Office, and not department, office, we were told. So I just want to make sure folks know that
we'll go into that later.
I got that right, absolutely. But one of the things, too, before we go to break, Will, I think of other things that you guys do, the boots on the ground, as they say, the Sheriff's Department does. Let's come back and talk about that and, during an emergency situation.
Absolutely.
You're listening to Kearney Live. Stay with us for this short message.
You love the programming? Say a special thank you to the underwriters like these who support KPGZ.
Kearney Trust Company is uniquely Kearney. They opened their doors in 1882 and have been financing goals and dreams ever since. Kearney Trust has a team of experienced lenders and a qualified staff to assist you with all of your financial needs. Your success is their priority. Whether you're looking for traditional checking and savings services, or you need cash management, mobile banking, mortgage, or lending services, Kearney Trust will provide you and your business with the resources you need to succeed. Information, speed, and convenience are all valuable commodities in our fast-paced world. For Kearney Trust Company, technology is an addition to, not a replacement for the personal banking relationship they like to have with their customers. The people of Kearney Trust Company focus on and try to fit the needs of all their customers. Kearney Trust Company is your partner for success with 2 convenient locations in Kearney at 310 West 92 Highway and 701 Watson Drive in Price Chopper. The phone number is 816-628-6666. Kearney Trust Company. Banking you can trust. Member FDIC.
I love that bumper music. That makes me happy when I hear it. Just gives me a little smile on my face. You're listening to Kearney Live, and we are visiting today with Captain Will Akin. He is with the Clay County Sheriff's Office, and we've been talking about emergency preparedness. Get yourself a weather radio. Would you do that today? I think I might. And the other thing, too, that we talked about just before the break, Will, was the whole notion of what you guys do as boots on the ground. What does the Sheriff's Department do if and when a tornado touches down?
At the first response or the first call that we got that a house was hit from 3 weeks ago when the tornado started in Kearney, our deputies jumped into action and they went out there again, placing themselves at risk, to make sure that they're serving the citizens of Clay County. And what we do is we go out to the locations that are hit to make sure that that life is saved, and to make sure that nobody's hurt. And if they are, to get the appropriate response, going.
Yeah. Along those lines, and I know we're going to get into this, but because you guys respond, people hear emergency response and they think tornado and stuff, but there's all these other things that you're responding to as well. But if I could do this little plug.
Do.
I realize as a citizen, it is the coolest thing to go out and look at damage and go all that stuff.
I know where this is going.
But do me a favor. Would you please hold off for a few minutes and let the emergency responders get there first and get out of their way? Because especially a tornado is a good example. access to roads a lot of times is obstructed. So the way in and way out is limited already. We don't need your car sitting there so you can go take pictures of a torn up tree. The tree will be there a little bit later. Please just let them get there because they have the equipment and they need to get to people and do medical things and all that sort of stuff. And they have equipment in their cars beyond what you have in yours. So just peace out for a minute, let them go do their thing, and then you can go gawk to your heart's content. Would you agree with me on that?
I agree wholeheartedly. You know, we have a lot of calls, and just from the pure respect point, you know, your house was just damaged or in some cases completely destroyed. And yet we have people out there parked on the side of the road with their cameras out, video recording or taking pictures of, you know, the chaos.
Right.
You know, we ask people, if you want to see that kind of damage, go to YouTube, right? Because there's going to be a lot of information on there.
Yeah.
But when you do it in affected area where we're trying to respond, it does hinder our efforts.
Right.
And it's not just law enforcement, fire, EMS. We're also talking about the highway department or public works, you know, who have to clear the trees out of the roadway so we can respond to an affected location.
How many?
Yeah, just let them do their thing.
No, I think that's right.
And then let them do their thing, please.
When you were,
and then you can motor on.
Right. When you were mentioning that, Jim, I could see Will shaking his head yes the entire time you were talking about that. I think that makes a lot of sense. How many do you have on the sheriff's department there, sheriff's office there in Clay County?
Total employees, I believe we have around 225, 230 employees. Sworn employees, I believe it's around 120.
Okay,
roughly.
So pretty good number.
Yes.
But Clay County is large, and
it is.
Yeah. So I wouldn't call you understaffed, but in the event of an emergency such as this, like we've been talking about here, weather, tornadoes, more specifically, I would imagine then you are working together with the State Highway Patrol and local
as well,
police departments and so forth. How does that coordination how does that work? How do you guys keep from sort of stepping all over each other and yet still managing to help each other?
That coordination piece is something that we exercise quite often and talk about in tabletop exercises constantly throughout the year. But one thing I want to point out is the sheriff's office may have that many employees, but we are limited to what we have on the road at that time, which is typically 4 to 6 deputies.
Oh, yeah. So that does feel understaffed.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so, you know, when a natural disaster happens, it's not one agency being able to take care of everything all in itself.
Right.
It's everyone working together. And, you know, we're going to respond. Highway Patrol is going to respond. You know, in Kearney's situation, Kearney responded. And then if you think about fire, you had Kearney Fire Protection District, you had Fishing River Fire Protection District, Excelsior Springs. Everyone's responding because we just don't know what we're getting ourselves into when we're responding, because we may need those assets, but we're also communicating at the same time. And one of the benefits that we have for the KC metro area is our radio system.
Right.
We can all communicate with each other.
Yeah.
And that's something that was a hard lesson learned over the years, really kind of, if you think about 9/11, not being able to communicate with each other causes problems because then you're putting resources into the same location. But if you overextend your resources, how are you going to respond to the next location?
Yeah.
So by that coordination piece, we know, okay, we have these individuals going here, we can focus on over here. And then when reports start coming in with people with injuries or, you know, gas line broken, we can send the appropriate resource over to that location. So that coordination piece is extremely important.
And I you know, the development, you're right, after 9/11, the amount of work that you guys do, I don't think is appreciated at all in coordination for how these things are put together well before they ever happen. So the tabletop exercises came about, I mean, we did them before, but the coordination between departments is outstanding now compared to what it was. We'll call it pre 9/11. Wouldn't you agree? That's kind of when the changeover was. Yeah. But the coordination, and it's one of those things, again, you guys do it so well, nobody ever talks about it because it's never a big issue. But
if you make it look easy, that means you're doing it right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, but a simple thing like you're talking about. So let's say we had an incident in Kearney, but you also had an incident in Liberty and all the way along the line.
Yes.
The coordination to be able to put the amount of resources where they're needed and not oversaturate and then deplete somewhere else. The coordination of that is amazing, and no one ever talks about it because it goes off so well. And you guys do a great job with that to make sure it's perfectly spread out the way it needs to be based on whatever happens.
Yeah, it's kind of like, the duck on top of a nice clear pond. You don't see it. It just looks really serene, but then underneath, when you see the legs flapping and it's super chaotic.
That's a great visual.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
But the fire chiefs and the police chiefs, they're a pivotal part in this because as emergency management, we are extremely limited on resources. But if you think about the coordination aspect to it, we're coordinating with police chiefs and fire chiefs and directors of EMS, depending on the setup. But everyone's working collectively, efficiently to make response as perfect as we can make it. And a lot of times people don't see that because there are no issues that arise from it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they are that good.
Right. Now, do you all have a certain frequency that everybody turns to at a time like that on the radios, or how do you all talk to each other without stepping on each other?
A lot of it, until it rises to the occasion where we have to be on the radio, takes place over cell phones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, as long as we have cell phone coverage.
Whatever it takes, basically.
Yep,
Yeah.
because, the coordinators from each municipality or each area, it's just as easy to make the phone calls. But now if we have to have a massive response come to a location or multiple locations, then we have pre-established radio talk groups that we can send, fire will operate off this talk group, and then law will work off this talk group.
Right.
But that's all coordinated by dispatch.
Okay.
And dispatch, man, they're the conductors of the orchestra, so to say, because they're the ones who are organizing all of that information and making sure it gets to the first responders the way it needs to get to them.
Yeah, these are people that may or may not be police officers. These are often civilian type positions. Is that right?
Civilian type of positions.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
they do a phenomenal job.
There's a little unknown factor in the law enforcement community that, the dispatcher pretty much runs your life. It's the way it works.
Sounds like the voice of experience.
If you're
Jim
getting
Dickerson.
to the end of your shift, you might want to be nice to that individual prior to that. And I don't mean like a couple hours. I'm like talking days.
I see how that plays out. Yeah. So what do you do? Bring back a box of donuts?
I can't tell you the secrets, but I can tell you that it pays off. And Brian can attest to this as well.
Yeah.
When you're on the last day of your work week and you're getting close and you want to make sure you don't get what we call the late call. Yeah.
I see where this is going.
Oh, hey, you know what? We're one happy family.
Yeah, until that happens.
Yeah.
But you get upset with your brothers and sisters, and that's what happens.
Yep, exactly right. Which, by the way, speaking of brothers and sisters, and I just want to point out, I saw your Facebook post, Will, over the weekend, the Father's Day post, and I saw a wonderful picture of your family. Let's just give them a little shout out. Let's talk about your kids. I know it looked like you had
three boys.
3 boys. That's right. I knew there was a pack of them.
Yeah, gosh.
Yeah.
I love talking about them.
A pack.
My oldest son, he's going to be 24. No, he's 23. Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what does that say about you? I know.
You know what? Yeah. It's a hard pill to swallow because when I look at him, I see another man, and in my mind, I don't feel like I'm old enough to have a son.
Can he take you?
Oh, that Mike.
Academically, maybe.
I think I surrendered it to my 2 sons when they were about, 15 or 16. That's when I decided I'm not even going to wrestle around with these guys
but
anymore.
I tell you what, all 3 of them together, they could take me, and they operate like that.
Yeah, and they like to remind you of it periodically. Yeah. No, you got just a wonderful looking family there.
Oh, thank you. Jared, my oldest son, he works as an environmental scientist out of Fort Wayne, Indiana. So he's doing really well for himself.
Good grief. Wow.
Yeah, I got you on the old IQ side there.
Yeah. He talks about, when he was going to school and talking about analytical chemistry and all that. And I'm just like, son, you lost me.
Can't help you with your homework.
You want to know the trick there? You do this. You do a lot of, yeah. And occasionally act like you're going to ask a question. And then like you answer it, go, well, no, I guess you're right. You're right. Because it makes it sound like you have a clue what you're talking about. When in reality, you're
voice,
I have no
voice
idea.
of experience.
Yeah, exactly. Well, my brother, I think I've told you, my brother's a neurologist and he works with dementia and that sort of thing. And he starts talking about stuff. Thanksgiving, love it. And I'm like, I have no idea what he's talking about, but I don't want to look like I don't know. So you do a lot of, Right. Well, do you think the neurons? No, I guess you're right. Yeah.
Right.
That's the way I pull it off. You feel free to try
That's
that.
funny. I'll try that.
Yeah. And then and the other two.
Yeah,
are-
so my middle son, he's 19. He'll be turning 20 in August. He's been in the military for almost 2 years.
Yeah,
Followed Dad's footsteps.
Nice.
And he went infantry of all MOSs, which he's excelling in. He's doing extremely well. Super proud of him. But yeah, almost 2 years, coming up on 2 years,
Yeah.
and he loves it.
That's
He
fantastic.
absolutely loves it. And then my youngest son, it's funny. We were all sitting at a dinner table. I like sharing this story. I started laughing, and at home I'm very animated, and not a whole lot of people know it, but I guess now they do.
Well, they do
But,
now.
yeah. But, my kids and my wife, they were looking at me going, what's so funny? They're waiting for the punchline. And I looked at my youngest son and I said, man, you're the luckiest kid at this table. And everyone's still waiting for the punchline. And so finally, he goes, well, why, Dad? And I said, because I've made all my mistakes on those two over there, pointing at the two older ones.
Well, not to mention that the youngest one usually gets away with the most and
man.
gets the most. I
But
think that,
all three of them are great kids. My youngest, he's 14. He's going to be a freshman in high school this year, going to Liberty North High School. But
But he wishes he could go to Kearney, doesn't he?
I don't know if that ever came up, but sometimes the look on his face every time Kearney's being, talked about.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Secrets out.
Kearney's a great
we
school,
know.
though.
We
Yep.
get it.
Yeah. But we have a lot of the same interests. We do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu together. We do CrossFit together, and so
cool.
we get
Yeah.
to spend a lot of time with each other, as opposed to my two older boys where, I spent, 3 years in Afghanistan, and a lot of our interaction was spent over Skype. I mean, at least we had digital communication.
Right.
Whereas when I joined the Army in 1994, we were still pen and paper.
Right. And speaking of your time in the service, tell us a little bit about your military history, because I know you're also a pilot. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So joined the Army in 1994. Didn't know what I was going to do with my life, and thought, the Army, well, there's more story, about my childhood leading me up to that point. But joining the Army was one of the best things that happened in my life. But when I went in, I enlisted as a parachute rigger. I was stationed at the airborne school. Anything airborne I did, I mean, it was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Until about 24, my body started feeling the effects of jumping out of airplanes all the time.
Oh, boy.
So I put my flight packet in and ultimately got accepted to the flight school in the Army, and ended up being a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter pilot,
Outstanding.
and spent the rest of my time flying helicopters.
Yeah.
Do you still fly now?
No, I don't. As an expensive hobby on the outside.
We'll get you back into
Right.
it.
Yeah, I found that out personally.
Yeah.
That's
Especially helicopters,
Well, I
fixed
can
wing-
imagine.
Well,
Yeah.
that's different.
right. So you started in fixed wing aircraft, and then you started
No,
right
into
day one.
rotary wing.
Is
Yes.
that right?
Yep. Yeah, the military, they, or at least the Army, they operate differently. You actually apply for rotary wing, and then you transition to fixed wing if those positions are open. But they're usually like small jet planes,
Right. Wow.
and transport, stuff like that.
That just sounds like a load of fun.
Oh, I loved it. But it seems like a different chapter in my life.
Right.
I've been in law enforcement now for a little over 16 years, and absolutely loved every minute of it.
Right. When you got out of the service, then you decided that, hey, this is the best place for me in law enforcement, or what? How,
So when I was 26, they diagnosed me with adult onset asthma. They permanently grounded me and told me I had to find a new job, so I couldn't be in the military anymore.
oh my goodness! Wow.
Yeah. So it was devastating. I didn't want to leave the military. I loved the military, but I had to have a job to help support my family.
Imagine that.
And law enforcement was it made the most sense.
Right. Right.
So, never wanted to be a cop,
Yeah.
but I went into it because I needed a job.
Yeah.
And am very glad that that's where life took me.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So at what point, when you started your law enforcement training, did you say, hey, you know what? This is working out for me?
It would have been the police
First
academy.
paycheck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
I
here we
can
go.
stay in my house this month. This will
Right.
be great. Yeah.
No, actually, I had to move from New York to Arizona to get a job with the Phoenix Police Department.
That sounds like a
And
pretty good move to me.
It was, especially when it was negative 40 degrees when I
Exactly.
left.
Right. Right.
in New York. And I think the temperature in Arizona at the time was like 70, 80 degrees. So we're talking about 110, 120 degree difference.
And very low humidity.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking
yes,
about.
yes.
Yeah.
And how'd you end up here?
Oh, man. So the current sheriff, Paul Vescovo, and I were contractors in Afghanistan working with the Afghan National Police.
Oh, I see.
And when we met, we were actually working in a unit called the Family Response Unit, and we were working with Afghan investigators investigating crimes against women and children, and also working gender rights and human rights violations. So we did a lot with Europol, with the Ministry of Interior, with Department of State, Department of Defense.
Yeah, these are things that the civilians, us civilians, just don't think about. There is so much more involved. There's a social aspect to war, to armed conflicts that people don't think about, and that's one of them right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we think of policing in our country as what it is,
Right.
but when you try to take that mindset or that the whole system, if you will, and take it to a country that
Totally different culture values.
absolutely,
Yeah.
the culture alone
I
is
can't
a
imagine.
challenge.
Yeah.
Let alone the language barriers and the everything that we have to communicate with, and it's different. Working with police chiefs over there, wow, that was very challenging. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, but working with the investigators in the Family Response Unit, that was extremely rewarding because they had a true passion to make their country a better place.
Well, that's good news. We're visiting today with Captain Will Akin. He's with the Clay County Sheriff's Office, and we are going to take a short break. You're listening to Kearney Live. We'll be right back.
Always remember to thank the underwriters for their support of KPGZ.
Kearney Trust Company is uniquely Kearney. They opened their doors in 1882 and have been financing goals and dreams ever since. Kearney Trust has a team of experienced lenders and a qualified staff to assist you with all of your financial needs. Your success is their priority. Whether you're looking for traditional checking and savings services, or you need cash management, mobile banking, mortgage, or lending services, Kearney Trust will provide you and your business with the resources you need to succeed. Information, speed, and convenience are all valuable commodities in our fast-paced world. For Kearney Trust Company, technology is an addition to, not a replacement for the personal banking relationship they like to have with their customers. The people of Kearney Trust Company focus on and try to fit the needs of all their customers. Kearney Trust Company is your partner for success with 2 convenient locations in Kearney at 310 West 92 Highway and 701 Watson Drive in Price Chopper. The phone number is 816-628-6666. Kearney Trust Company. Banking you can trust. Member FDIC.
We're back on Kearney Live. We've got Will Akin in studio with us today. He's captain over there at the Sheriff's Office in Clay County, Missouri. We've been talking about emergency preparedness. We've also been talking a little bit about your background in the military and some of the work that you did in Afghanistan. And as you were mentioning earlier, I think, dealing with an entirely different culture and sort of negotiating language barriers and so forth like that, I would imagine prepared you in a way you never would have imagined for when you came back to do a somewhat similar thing here stateside.
Yeah, working in Afghanistan, working with that culture was very eye-opening because the team that I had in the last year I was in Afghanistan was a security team made up of 7 nationalities. And so when you talk about, trying to do a mission with a culture and a language that no one speaks or knows to an extent, and then have to take your team and know everything about them also, it opened my eyes.
Yeah.
But you know what? It boils down to dignity and respect. Just treating people the way you want to be treated and just try to understand the dynamics and then apply what you know to those dynamics. On my team, we had, people from Romania, South Africa, Nepal, Macedonia, Bosnia, Fiji, and American contractors. So Man, language barriers, cultural barriers, and then trying to work with the Afghanistan National Police and investigators.
Right. Not to mention that a lot of those places that you suggested, just, in that list of locations, I think many of us would be hard pressed to point to every single one of those on a map.
Oh, right.
I could point to Fiji.
Exactly right.
A place where everyone wants to go.
Yeah, if you want to know where Fiji is, I'm here. I'm your guy.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. You'll be my travel guide. That'll be great. Yeah, but I think there's cultural issues even here stateside. I can imagine that you deal with somewhat, and people kind of call us a melting pot and that sort of thing. But I think there still are language barriers, and I think to a larger degree now than ever before, because I think we have an influx of folks from all over the planet who want to live here in the United States of America, and I would think that. How did your military training sort of help you at times like that?
I think a lot of it has to do with patience and just understanding that, talking louder doesn't make them understand easier.
Right. Yeah.
That's what everybody does.
Yes, yeah.
If somebody doesn't understand you, what do? You yell at them.
I can't speak the language, but if I speak English louder, you're going to get this. Yeah.
Right. So you have to take that into consideration, but add the fact that somebody has just experienced a traumatic event, and then try to work with them. Yeah. I mean, it's sometimes hard to work with them in a calm environment, let alone when they've experienced something that was just absolutely horrible. Right. And again, I think it boils down to dignity and respect and treating them the way you would want to be treated in that circumstance. Yeah,
I think that says a lot about you, and I think that says a lot about, probably the way, there's no probably about it. This is the way law enforcement are trained. And I fully recognizing that they don't always get the benefit of the doubt in the media and other places like that. But I think you're trained to be gentlemen or gentle people if you're not a man. But
I think so. There's definitely an aspect or component to being trained in the military and law enforcement to react to certain circumstances or scenarios. But on the flip side of that, we also have to work with people and we serve others. Military serving our country, law enforcement serving our communities. And we have to take that into consideration, be sensitive to the cultural diversity that we have in our area as well as other areas. And then, add the traumatic experience to that. We have to be able to take care of them.
Right. Do you do any, is there public training for emergency preparedness? Are there things that people can do? Are there workshops that people can go to that you guys sponsor or are involved with?
Nothing that we sponsor, but there is definitely a huge resource out there through the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA. And so you can go and take independent study courses online. You can be involved in local CERT teams, which is communities that are active in community citizens. Oh my gosh! Now off the top of my head, I can't.
I put you on a spot.
Citizens Emergency Response Team.
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Training.
Yes.
And I made that up. It's probably wrong.
No, that works good enough. But we have those individuals who are emergency preparedness minded.
Right.
And in those classes, they learn how to basically the structure of a response first of all, because even though like what we talked about earlier, it looks calm because nothing bad is happening and we're responding to it. But the training that goes behind emergency response or emergency management, we have so many classes and independent study courses that we have to take to educate ourselves in order to make it smooth like that.
Right.
But those courses are still available to the public.
Right.
And it affords them the opportunity to get more aware and more knowledgeable in emergency management.
I remember as I was growing up, there was a civil defense chapter, I guess you would call it, in Gladstone. And in fact, I used to work with one of the guys that who was a big part of that. And they had courses, and it was sort of like, I don't know, it was like scouting for big people. And you could go to these meetings and kind of see what's going on. You could talk about things sort of like, like we're doing here.
Yes.
But I thought it was all kind of nerdy and kind of weird, I mean, I was just a kid, but it was interesting nonetheless. But so I'm thinking, where is the civil defense, number one? What happened to that? Did that just go away or fizzle out or what?
I'm not sure because that was before my time.
Well, that explains a lot there. It had
Way to date yourself, Mike.
I knew it had to be generational. Yeah, remember they wore those steel hats, and it said CD on the front of it. Yeah, now that was World War II. That's right. Yeah,
Yeah, that was
I'm
a while
not
ago.
that old. Yeah,
But it's important to have civilians and citizens that are interested in that, because when we talk about a response and then lacking the resources
Right.
needed to sustain operations, that's where they come in, because they have a little more specialized training,
right.
and they can block roads for us, so we don't have to have law enforcement with a car with their lights lights on rotating to tell
Yes.
people don't come this
Right.
direction.
Right.
So we can use them, but they're also knowledgeable in incident command system, or the National Emergency Management System, NIMS or ICS. So they have that better understanding, and they can help those of us who have the positions that we have in trying to manage a disaster.
And it's a government thing if it has an acronym. NIMS, CERT.
There's actually
All
a
that
booklet
stuff.
that
Yeah.
has nothing but acronyms in there to let you know
Because
what
you
they
have to
mean.
look all of them up. So, again, if you come to a road where it says road closed, hypothetically, and there's a barricade in front of said road, are you supposed to drive around the right side of the sign or the left side? How does that work?
I prefer they didn't drive around the
Okay,
sign.
I just wanted to
Road
make sure.
closed is road closed for a reason.
I thought maybe I was the one that didn't understand the concept, because I like it when there's cones and a sign and flags and everything else, and people are like, but I have to go that way.
It would be nice for everyone to understand that we don't do that to make an inconvenience for anyone, because we put a road closed sign. Oh, here's a better example. The road closed sign has been up for 3 days, and the disaster is over.
Right.
But there might still be water over the roadway, and it might still be running water. And when you pass the barrier and you go into the running water, and then your car gets washed off the road, and we have to do a water rescue,
Right.
that causes problems for us. And we would just much rather people say, okay, even though I've lived here 20 years, there are other ways to get home.
And you could do yourself a whole lot of favors. I would implore you, if you're sitting at home right now, please take the time to find an alternate route to your home from wherever you may be going. That way, if an emergency should present itself, then you can say to yourself, oh, I can go the other way, instead of just going, I have to go that way.
It's all a part of having that plan ready.
Pretty good advice. I think, though, you may have pointed it out earlier that everybody is an independent journalist now with their phone, and let's face it, these phones take pretty nice videos, and
Especially the newer ones.
right? And don't you want to be the one that all of the media outlets would like to buy your video from? And so let's face it, the media is not helping your cause during times of emergency.
It's that innate nature about us that we're curious.
Sure.
And we want to see it, but also to capture the moment in time that we can watch for the rest of our lives.
No doubt
especially
about
with digital
that.
media. But when you become a part of the problem that we have to respond to,
Right.
property is one thing, but your life is another. And life safety is our number one priority whenever we respond to a disaster. Well, when you're outside being a citizen reporter, trying to get that perfect footage of the tornado that's coming your way, you now have become a part of the problem that we have to respond to, or potentially have to respond to.
Right.
And here's a question for you, Mike. I'm not gonna put this on you. I'm gonna put it back
Jim
on
likes
Mike.
to put me on the
I'm gonna
spot
put
when
you
we're
on
on
the
the
spot.
air.
If you take video of let's say after a disaster's gone, a tornado,
You mean me personally?
you personally,
Yes.
and you take video of the disaster.
Yes.
Okay, and you send your video to channel, I'm not going to pick one out, so I'll make one up, channel 8, because we don't
There
have
you
a
go.
channel 8 here.
Right.
How much does channel 8 pay you for that video?
I have no idea.
That would be $0.00.
But look at the fortune and fame you might potentially get down there.
that would still be $0.00.
Right. Well, how about the
because
fame?
in 5 seconds, someone else has something that's
Yeah, no
far
doubt.
better than what you
No
have.
doubt.
So please, I said it before and I'll say it again.
Leave
Let
your-
these guys do their thing.
Yeah, leave your phone at home or
And you can get your phone, your video. You know what? We'll all be all right if we have to wait another 3 hours.
Well,
we'll be fine.
Something else just occurred to me, and that is that there are some unscrupulous characters who like to show up at disaster sites and proceed to loot the place.
Well,
So
there's that.
where you just want to, they want to come in and pick up what's laying around, because all of a sudden, if it's not in somebody's house, it's theirs. And so you're potentially dealing with folks that are, that want to come in and create even more havoc.
Yeah. If you think about social media, I don't think it boils down to dollars and cents. I think it boils down to how many people are liking my post.
Well, that's it.
And then
exactly.
when you think about the quote unquote looters,
yeah.
If you think about 3 weeks ago when the tornado went through Kansas, and then pieces of that area was found in Smithville,
right?
We have to not only protect life, but we also have to protect everything that surrounds that family who just went through that disaster or that incident, because their property, their life is scattered in their yard, across the yard, in the roadway. So you have to think about things that have your social security number on it, your address or personal information. We have to protect that too.
Yeah. Not to mention, photographs and things that are, particularly meaningful to you.
Sentimental.
Yeah, exactly.
Sentimental.
Right.
We have to collect that stuff.
Right. And that is amazing, because we were talking on another show earlier today that I found more stuff yesterday in my yard from there. It's from Kansas. We had previously identified some stuff, and then we found another piece yesterday, and it's just amazing how far that stuff came. And ended up in our yards and all that sort of thing.
I was told that the debris field in the sky reached about 55,000 feet.
Good.
If you think
that
about,
makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it just gets carried and dropped wherever it lands.
That is incredible. I mean, when you think about it, the power of a thing like that. Yeah. Well, anything else on your mind today, Will, that you can think of as we're talking about emergency preparedness? I think we've hammered home pretty good the notion that you probably, if the road's blocked, don't go there. In fact, stay home, stay out of these guys' way so they can do their job.
Yeah.
We got that. We got the emergency radio, which I think is the weather radio. Is something I don't own, because I depend on my phone. But we also talked about, phones can go down too. So,
depending on the size of the incident of the tornado,
right.
if a cell tower gets taken down or something like that, you may be impacted with just the lack of information there by not being able to use your cell phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What other things can you think of? What about water and things of that nature? That,
definitely have a plan, but how do you make a kit? And so we tell people, and we encourage people to make a kit that lasts about 72 hours. There's a push for 96 hours, but I say 2 weeks, because you don't know how long the incident's going to impact you. But having, like we discussed, flashlights with extra batteries, the weather radio, water, food, clothing, shoes, things of that nature. But don't forget about medication. People who rely on medication, if it's in your refrigerator, let's say it's insulin, and you don't have that with you down in the basement, how's that going to affect you? Or people who take...
Or it ends up scattered all over.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Or heart medication, or whatever you need at a time, it's never convenient, right? But having that down there with you. But here's another thing. We learned years ago, I think most of the stories come out of Hurricane Katrina, that people will give up their own lives for their pets. And I get it. Pets are like children. They're family members. So have things down in the basement for your pets too, whether it's a cat, dog, or some other animal. You have to have food for them. You have to have amenities. Hey, you know what? People have medications for their pets now. Don't forget that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So definitely prepare, but prepare before the disaster. I saw a video. What we talked about, we know that systems come now because the National Weather Service, they do their jobs, and meteorologists do their jobs. And then 24 hours in advance, you see pictures at the grocery store of the bread shelves all like missing, because now people are starting to prepare at the last minute.
Yeah, even during a snowstorm.
Right. Oh my gosh, even worse.
How does everybody get bread?
Jim, I don't know.
What
milk, bread, eggs?
We haven't bought a
I would be in the Twinkie aisle or something like that. This is an emergency.
We don't even buy white bread anymore.
I know. Well, I don't think most people do, unless it's like, I haven't purchased bread in 3 years, but there's snow coming. I need to get a loaf. I don't understand it.
That's another good point. We've talked mostly about tornadoes, and we've mentioned some flooding, but let's not forget about other disasters that have happened in our area, could happen.
Yeah, good point.
And ice, even though it's summertime now, but man, ice, that is the worst, because inevitably every season when the first snowfall hits or the first ice lands on the roads and it ices over, we have well over 100 calls for service on the very first day because people are either sliding off the road or crashing into other cars.
Oh boy.
That's also being a part of being prepared.
Right.
Is when you see those kinds of environmental conditions, take note.
Yeah.
Give yourself more space. Give yourself more time to leave. And let's talk about fog. Right?
Yeah, indeed.
You know, you put your headlights on.
Yeah.
Give yourself more time. Don't be in a hurry. And that's what really kind of gets a lot of people in trouble is when they get in a hurry.
And the other thing is, and some people don't realize this, but if you have a 4-wheel drive vehicle, number one, congratulations. That's awesome.
I think everybody has one.
But if you're on ice, all 4-wheel drive means is you now have 4 wheels spinning out of control as opposed to 2.
Isn't that the truth?
And when you're going around like a top into the ditch, your 4-wheel drive isn't doing you a whole lot of good.
Not going to help. Yeah.
They're not going
to help. Yeah.
But you bring up a good point too, even though at home, ice storms are more, I don't want to say they're more dangerous, but they're more encompassing than a tornado, for example, because a tornado's kind of,
it's isolated.
It's isolated, and you get immediate response, gets there, no problem. Ice storms, especially if you go back to the one we had, what was that, 93, 92, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
That was so widespread. Right. And it took so long to get so many people that didn't have power we're talking weeks without power. There was people that back then we couldn't get to for days. Where a tornado, we can get to you pretty quick. I say, wait, you guys can get to it
relatively quickly.
But an ice storm, and not only is it harder to get to them, there's some people that need to be gotten to that you don't know they're there. You haven't identified who all needs help yet.
The first people that come to mind are people who rely on oxygen.
Oh, yeah,
and
right.
If the power goes out and we can't, excuse me, if they can't get their oxygen or if we can't respond to them, it puts them in a critical situation. And so we have to, think about them. And we have procedures in place and we have partnerships with different organizations to get them help as soon as we can.
Good stuff to know.
Yeah, those are the people that we have to think about. But then also, if you have an emergency during icing conditions or snowing conditions, we cannot respond any faster than we can safely do so.
Yep, good point. We've been visiting today with Captain Will Akin. He's with the Clay County. I'm going to try this again with the Clay County Sheriff's Office. Thanks so much, Will, for being with us. It has just been a really enlightening hour here visiting with you. Come back anytime, would you?
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. You've been listening to Kearney Live. Join us again next week. We'll do something similar. Maybe not as good. Maybe better. Dial in and
Is
find.
That possible? Better?
Probably not. Not today.
We always strive to do better.
We're always at the top of our game. Thanks for listening. See you next week.